Live, where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Good evening, I'm Maria Garcia. Welcome to ABC-7 Extra. Tonight we're taking a closer look at how Americans now have less tolerance for what is considered offensive speech or offensive symbols. Our discussion tonight asks, is this extreme political correctness, or is it a justified effort to squeeze out outdated, perhaps bigoted symbols? Some recent examples: the effort to stop the display of the Confederate battle flag. Critics say the flag belongs in a museum, not on state or public grounds, citing there is documented evidence it was a symbol of white supremacy. TV Land pulled the Dukes of Hazzard recently, presumably because of the flag. Supporters of this flag, though, say it's a symbol of heritage and history.
To say that the Aryan Nation or other groups like that have ownership of that flag is just totally false.
You can't separate the heritage from the hatred that is associated with it.
Then there's Donald Trump. Since his remarks characterizing Mexican immigrants as rapists and criminals, NBC and Univision have both dumped his Miss Universe broadcast. Macy's has dumped his products, and other businessmen have cut projects with him.
No, there's no apology, because what I said is right. I mean, what I said is 100% right. There is tremendous distress on the border. You know that better than anybody. The Mexican people are fantastic. The relationship I have with them is great. As I told you, many people have done business with me from Mexico, and I love the Mexican people. But no apology, because everything I said is 100% correct. All you have to do is read the newspapers.
Donald Trump does not represent the Republican Party. I was offended by his remarks. Listen, Hispanics in America and Hispanics in Texas, from the Alamo to Afghanistan, have been extraordinary people, citizens of our country and of our state. They have served nobly. And to paint with that broad a brush that Donald Trump did is, I mean, he's going to have to defend those remarks.
So tonight we're exploring if this is all political correctness run amok or if it's justifiable progress. Those are just some examples. And joining us, attorney Donald Williams and artist and cartoonist Bob Diven. You can email us your comments and your questions now to ABC7Extra at KVIA.com. Call us at 496-1775 or tweet me at Maria G at ABC7. Let's start our discussion. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the invitation.
We appreciate it. So, you know, let's start with the Confederate flag. And I want to pose this question. Could it be that it's not that people are suddenly offended by this now, but that maybe the groups who are offended did not have a place in the public dialogue because they were oppressed 40, 30, arguably even 20 years ago, and so finally they're more empowered, so you hear their voices more? What do you all think about that?
You want to go first?
We'll start with you, Don.
Okay, we're going to start with me. Basically, I think what brought everything to the head was the killings at the AME Church in Charleston. As a black man who's been black all of my life in the United States, that flag has always engendered some sort of negative reactions and emotions in me when I didn't even know what it meant. But once you go to school, once you experience, especially in the 50s and the 60s when you're going through the civil rights and so forth, it was always an answer to me getting some rights. And basically, after doing some research and so forth, this heritage thing, I'm sorry, I don't know what word to use, but let's say crap, because everyone should know what it means. All you have to do is live, and all you have to do is do a little reading, and there's no research that I have come across that shows any positive reasoning for that battle flag. So I'm sorry. What
do you feel and what do you think when you hear groups? There was a rally this weekend in Houston and Galveston to keep that specific Confederate flag in public spaces. People who say, you know, it was not a hateful symbol? Groups who use it for hate don't monopolize its meaning, and it has a broader meaning. What do you think when people say that?
Again, they have to go back and research why the flag was created in the first place. We're talking about the battle flag, and that battle flag has no positive reasoning behind it. The creator states about the white supremacy and the subordination of the black race, and this is a symbol of it and so forth. So for someone to come and say, well, it's part of my heritage. Well, I'm from the South, and I lived in one of the Confederate states. It is not part of my heritage. It's part of a nightmare that I've had to live most of my life.
And, you know, speaking of that, it's 2015, and that flag is still there in many public spaces throughout the South. You mentioned the South. So why now? Why do you think obviously it came to fruition because of the killings, but it's been used in other acts of violence in the past. It's been a symbol. Some groups that are considered hate groups have taken that flag as a symbol. So it goes back to my other question. Do you think that, again, it's not as if black people are suddenly uncomfortable with the flag? As you've said, you've been uncomfortable with it for a long time. Could it be now, though, that African Americans have a much more consequential, influential voice in the American landscape, and because of that we're hearing more about not just black people but what other minority groups find offensive, because they're more prominent now in the general American dialogue? What do you think about that, Bob?
Well, from my perspective, what I'd add, and I really appreciate hearing your perspective, obviously, I think there's been a consciousness raising over this last year, and I think it's begun, well, it probably began with Trayvon Martin and the growth of the Black Lives Matter. And what's happened is it's become so clear that there's a whole section of the country, me being a representative of that, you know, I grew up in Illinois, in New Mexico, so I never experienced the blatant segregation. So there's been this consciousness raising where, oh, there are people there's a huge swath of our population having an experience very different than ours, that's very real and very valid. And I've gotten into some trouble with some of my friends by occasionally on Facebook saying, you know, this is a good time for us white folks to just shut up and listen until we do understand. So I think that's what the shift, and it's been building. So when the AME Church was attacked in about as blatant of a racist motivated way as you could imagine, I think there's just this sense of national revulsion that it's like, okay. And even Jimmy Carter, I heard him the other day interviewed saying that he felt like as a country we'd kind of taken our eye off the ball in terms of advancing racial issues. You
know, speaking of that with other groups, I remember last year I did a story on Columbus Day. I interviewed these women who started a petition to try to get the city to rename Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day, because they were deeply offended by the title of the day, you know, citing the atrocities that Columbus committed and bestowed on Native peoples, and they were truly passionately offended by it. They explained how they did it, you know, want to have this conversation with their children where they said, you know, in America we celebrate Columbus Day. But after I did this story, we also got a lot of emails from viewers who said, you know, when is this going to stop? I mean, everybody's going to be offended by something, so do we change everything? I mean, who decides what we change and what we don't change? Because somebody's bound to get offended by something. What do you think of that?
Let me add to this. Yes, a lot of us have different bones to pick, but there has been nothing in the history of this country, as far as I know, that has been more devastating than slavery and its aftermaths. We're still living it. Okay, so now the population is growing and so forth of black people. Now, maybe it didn't start with Trayvon. Maybe it started with how disrespectful that our president has been treated.
Now, Don,
and then on and on. So at some point, when is this going to stop?
But there are people who would hear that statement and who would say there was a genocide of Native American people.
Exactly.
So, you know, we are also offended by Columbus Day, and we have a right to be offended.
Understand.
So the question is, there are so many symbols in our society of historical markers in the past that now we find offensive or repulsive. But what do we change? What do we don't? Who sets the rules for this? Who sets the rules for what we should change and what we shouldn't? What do you think, Bob?
Well, I think there are several answers to that. One, there's a good article in the Washington Post about, you know, we can't whitewash history. We need to remember the history. But there's no question that a Confederate flag should not be flying on any governmental building, because what that does is give a sense of government sanction for the flag. And the flag is clear. I mean, you know, anyway. So there's talk, you know, New Mexico about Don Juan de Oñate, well, the big statue here, because, you know, he lopped off the feet of a bunch of every able-bodied man during whatever that revolt was in New Mexico. But I think what we're really aiming for, the thing we're aiming for is fairness, is every citizen to be treated fairly. And so when we talk about removing a symbol or trying to, you know, correct wrongs of history, what we're really about is it's a means to an end. The end is equal rights and equal opportunity for every citizen, as much as that is humanly possible. And so we've noticed, like with same-sex marriage now, it's like there was the civil rights movement, women's liberation, women getting the vote. So these things, it's like, I feel like as we move forward, we gain a more nuanced understanding of what human rights are, what human dignity is. And so it's only natural that same-sex marriage would come about. Well, at some point, you know, it's like we take care of the biggest obvious issue, or we think we take care of it, and we're able to move on down the line. You know, so it's like, yes, I think at this point, it's like, I think it's completely fair to focus on Black Americans' experience and to try to move this thing ahead. Speaking
of gay marriage, you know, we'd be remiss, obviously, if we didn't talk about the dialogue that was sparked because of the massive change in our country, legalizing gay marriage. There's been a lot of talk that people who oppose gay marriage will now be ostracized, that they're now officially on the wrong side of the public dialogue. And there's people who say, and deservedly so, you know, gay people were on that side for many years. And there's people who say, you know, that shouldn't be the case. People still have the religious right to oppose it, and they shouldn't be ostracized for it publicly. What do you all think about that?
Well, from my standpoint, no citizen should be penalized for a condition or situation that they cannot control. Most people think that, you know, being gay or so forth is a choice, and I personally don't think that, okay? But at this point in time, from the legal standpoint, I'm just looking at it from the, civil union. Because there is just so many different situations where they need to have some sort of legitimacy just to carry on everyday business, especially when you're living together, you've bought property together and things along those lines. Now, since the law has nothing to do with the religious aspect of it, then it's a civil union, and if that is the way to handle some of our civil legal problems, then, and you have no way of determining whether you're going to be born gay or not, let it go.
Calvin tweeting at us, nobody is born with hate, it's learned. We all need to teach the younger generations how wrong it is and to stop it. And you are speaking about the legalities of gay marriage.
Exactly.
But there are still social ramifications. Our society is still trying to navigate with this shift in how we view gay marriage, right? And you heard the president say this is one of those social issues where the country shifted to the other side in such a short time. 8 years ago, public opinion on this was so different.
Exactly.
So the question is it flipped now? You hear, especially from sort of the evangelical right in the country, saying we now will be ostracized or are being ostracized because we're against gay marriage.
I think this has caused me some concern, because when some of the southern states first started reacting to this, I thought, are we going to have an uprising of some sort? I thought the Confederacy has taken a few blows, serious blows in the last couple of weeks, and I thought, and it's kind of revealed that we still have this divide in the country.
Very deep divide.
Very deep divide. And I actually ended up taking comfort, and I hope I know it's kind of a stretch, but I took some comfort in realizing, wait a minute, when civil rights were passed, there was resistance as well. But it didn't stop it. I mean, the South resisted, but it's almost like the same, it's almost like the Confederacy is where the resistance still is. But I feel like, you know, like Louisiana changed course, though. They switched from saying we're going to hold for 25 days to not saying that. And now it's down to a handful, I think, of county clerks who may just have to resign their positions because they don't understand that they have a civil job, that they have a government. They've taken an oath to fulfill the duties of their office, and that's not a religious office.
Okay, when we come back, we have to they're telling me we have to go to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to take more phone calls. We're also going to talk about the financial consequences of saying something offensive. We live in a day now where somebody could record you, put it on Facebook, and if you're taken out of context, or if you said something that somebody finds offensive, you could see major consequences. We're going to talk about that. You're watching ABC-7 Extra. You can tweet me at Maria G ABC7. Call us at 915-496-1775 or email us at ABC7Extra@KVIA.com. We'll be right back with your phone calls. Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. We have a tweet from Ryan who says, so-called political correctness is the false Me Too narrative that waters down the struggle of African Americans. Let's go to our phone lines now. I believe Juan is on the phone lines. Juan, what is your comment or your question?
Yeah, the Confederate flag was hijacked by the Ku Klux Klan, but everyone's worried about that. But we have atrocities committed by ISIS halfway around the world against minorities, Catholics, Christians, gays and lesbians being killed left and right. No one seems to care. We need to care about that and not about the menial stuff of a flag.
Thank you very much. So Juan is saying, you know, yes, the Confederate flag was hijacked by the KKK, but ISIS right now killing minorities, lesbians, gay people. We should focus on that, and you know, essentially saying that the Confederate flag seems trivial to what ISIS is doing across the world. What do you think, Don?
I tend to sympathize with his position. But basically, this Confederate flag thing leads to other things, such as the murder in this church and holding it up and so forth. So at this point, there are certain symbols that bring out certain types of actions. And I'm really not that afraid of ISIS, but I'm afraid of one of my citizens who carries or talks positively about a Confederate flag.
Okay.
And if I could say, that argument is correct, that there are big things to worry about. There may be bigger things to worry about. But here's the thing. If that argument is used just to avoid talking about this particular issue, then it becomes an invalid argument. Why does it have to be one or the other? Why do we have to ignore the concerns of black Americans about this racist symbol because there are other possible threats out there? we can do more than one thing at once. And if it's ever used as an excuse to just end the conversation, as I think it was in that case, then I think it becomes invalid.
Okay, let's go to another phone call. Andy in Central on the line. Hi, Andy. What is your comment or your question?
This question is for the attorney. I'd like to ask you, what do you mean? Could you please explain how the president is being mistreated? Is it because of his color or because of the job he's doing? Thank you.
Well, in my opinion, it's obviously not the job he's doing, because he's done better than the last 3 or 4 that we've had.
About half of the country would disagree with that statement. I mean, it's true. About half of the country would disagree with that statement. Of course, half
the country would disagree with it, but I'm just looking at the facts, okay? We went through, 2 Republican presidents that put us in a bind and so forth, in all kinds of situations. Everything that he has done has been positive. Now, was he perfect? No. But there has never been the type of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for, disrespect. And I believe the disrespect toward Obama is because he's black, period.
Can you give us an example of that disrespect?
Well, remember when, I think it was during the
State of the Union.
State of the Union. But then reading the different blogs, reading different opinions and so forth, if you have a legitimate reason, criticize him. But a lot of the things that's coming about is because, in my opinion, because he's black. Because I've had to live through certain things just like it, regardless of how good you are. Most people they don't care. You're in the top 1% of the nation as attorneys and so forth. But one lady came to me one time, she says, "Oh, I didn't know you were black," and walked out. So now I start putting my picture on any of my stuff, so that people don't think that, I'm trying to get over.
And Don, this is really an interesting topic, because it intertwines politics with race relations, right? And like I said, half of the country would disagree with you. So for the people who say, he's the president, he's going to be the most scrutinized person in the world. He is going to have a microscope on everything he does, and it's perfectly legitimate to criticize him, and as Americans we have a right to criticize him, and it's unfair to label somebody racist because they're criticizing the President of the United States, because for reasons you may find illegitimate in criticism against the president, some Americans may find it perfectly legitimate.
If you have I have some legitimate complaints. I don't agree with him on everything, okay? But I think I'm in a better position to determine whether the situation is racial than you are, or somebody else is, because I've had to live it. There's a difference than saying I don't agree with that, than to talk about his children, talk about his mother, talk about those types of things, when all he's trying to do is be the president of the United States. So when you attack on a personal level, that's no longer based on professional competence. That's based on racism. And until you live it for 64 years, a lot of times you can't tell me what it is.
Okay, let's go to Frank in Eastwood. Frank, what's your comment or your question?
Okay, I'm a Christian. I'm not against or for gay marriage, but will I be called a bigot in case I say, you know what, I don't agree with the ruling from the Supreme Court? Thank you very much.
Okay, so Frank's saying he's a Christian, he's not against or for gay marriage, but will he be called a bigot if he's against it?
Depends on why he's against it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he may be called a bigot. There's no protection in the law for that. We may get called names. The more important question is, would he face any legal sanction? And it's like, no, not as a private citizen.
Right.
Or, it's like, there's this myth going around that somehow churches and Christian churches and ministers will be forced to perform gay marriages. It's like that's never going to happen. That's never been part of our American tradition. However, if you do own a business in the public square, it's the same now as if you turned away a black customer because you were racist. So again, people get what I heard in the earlier question too is people go to defensiveness so quickly. And I speak as as a Yankee white boy, but it's so easy to get defensive. I mean, just around gender issues, any experience that's not our own. Well, we can't live each other's lives, but we can stop and listen. If there's something that confuses us and makes us defensive, then I think it's time to stop and listen till we understand it. And we all have stories. We all have things. We all experience things, but it doesn't give us a right to dismiss experiences that I think are more serious than our own.
We have to take a commercial break. When we come back, more of your phone calls. We have a few people waiting, so stay with us. You're watching ABC-7 Extra. Remember, you can tweet me at MariaGABC7, call us at 915-496-7075, or email me at ABC7Extra@KVIA.com. We'll be right back. Welcome to ABC-7 Extra. Let's go to Vern on the east side on the phone. Hi, Vern. What's your comment or your question?
Yes, my comment is that we don't need to rewrite history. That was tried by the communists in Russia. It didn't work. But we need to edit history. We need to delete some of the offensive emblems, such as the Confederate flag, the swastika, which tend to arouse hatred and to focus people's attention on negative emotions.
Thank you very much. And that was Vern saying we don't have to rewrite history, but we can edit it to remove some of the most offensive symbols. Getting back to what we were talking about offensive speech, and going back to Donald Trump, he's a presidential hopeful. He's under the microscope. Arguably, a lot of people would say he deserves a scrutiny, and many people would say him losing business is deserved. But let's say for a minute that he wasn't running for president. Let's say for a minute this was not somebody in the public eye as much as Trump. We've all said things in unguarded moments, imprudent things that maybe we regretted, and that could, if taken out of context, could make us seem maybe bigoted, maybe out of touch. And so do we live in an age where if you say something, you could really, really face tremendous financial consequences because you said something in an imprudent moment, in an unguarded moment? And is that good or is that bad?
Well, I won't claim that our application of disgust is fair in the public sphere or evenly distributed. It's a natural thing that if you have more at stake, more to lose, somebody's going to sue you. What the Bible says, a rich man's wealth may ransom him, but a poor man hears no threat. So I don't know. I mean, it's sort of satisfying to see Donald Trump get a few knocks. I don't know that it'll really hurt him. He's not somebody that it's going to ruin him. So there's that. But at the same time, I think, people say that customers are free to move their business elsewhere. So he's not being censored in that way. I mean, obviously, what he said was broadcast.
But are people now, just even regular people, small business owners, do you think treading so much more lightly now because they're concerned that they could really lose out on business if they said something that somebody found offensive?
Well, I think it's good that people are now sensitive to what they say and what they do. The ordinary guy is not going to suffer. But when you're running for president, you can't come up with stupid stuff like that and expect to get by. What scares me is that after making such an idiotic statement, he became number 2 in the running. So there are people that...
There is a surge in the polls.
Exactly.
I mean, he's up.
Exactly. But the mere fact that he said it, you can the only way I can punish him is, one, I wouldn't vote for him anyway, but I can be in a position to help boycott what makes him tick. And that is about the only thing that we can do. It goes back to the old boycotting situation during the civil rights era and so forth. Nobody was listening to you and so forth, so you stop riding the bus goes broke. But for the ordinary citizen, you do have free speech. We don't have to agree with everything that you say and so forth. And most of the time, if you're the ordinary citizen, we don't really care. But when you're running for president, or if you're running for governor, or when you are going to be in a position to control people's lives, you have to be responsible and accountable for what you say and do.
You know, speaking of free speech, I mean, we do have the legal right of free speech. No one is going to jail for what they say, right? That you're not going to get prosecuted for expressing yourself. That is your right as free speech. But there's this argument that there's this new speech police that, like you said, is going to boycott you, is going to do something that makes you either lose out on business or lose out on your livelihood because you said something offensive.
Well, the downside of the current climate, and there is some truth to this, is that somebody can be overly sensitive and fly off the handle just based on a rumor. I mean, that's always been the truth in this country. We can have witch hunts over their fads, you know, things people get upset about, and suddenly we see, you know, devil worshippers everywhere, or what have you, or racists everywhere. But here's the thing: the tricky part of all this talk about is what we're really after is changing people's minds, is increasing people's understandings. We're not. This isn't about trying to round up all the racists and throw them in jail. It's trying to move people away from racism. It's trying to make people aware of these biases that we all carry, every single one of us, to whether to, and just to become aware, to acknowledge that we have them, that you don't have to be a racist to have them. Everybody has them. And if we can just acknowledge that we have, so I hear so much defensiveness in these questions. You know, everybody's just defensive, and they're not hearing what people are saying.
Okay, well, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate
so much.
Thank you, Don. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us here on ABC-7 Extra. We hope you found this informative. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.